Good morning, everyone. It's great to have you here. Just before we start, just a little bit of housekeeping. On the right side, you can see a chat where you can state your questions. And if you like to connect with other people who are attending the event, you can just click on the tab People and link up with the attendees there. Agenda-wise, we're going to start with the session with Steffen. Steffen is co-founder of a company called Dreamdata, and we're actually really delighted to have them in our portfolio. Dreamdata provides other businesses with actionable analysis on what drives B2B revenue. And that session will be followed by Q&A, which will be led by Stephen Allott. Many of you already know him, and he's our venture partner here at Seedcamp. So that's it from me. I'm just gonna leave it up to Steffen to take it from here.
That's great, Dana. Thank you. So Stephen asked me in my former capacity as head of marketing for a B2B company to share some tangible ideas about how to do digital lead generation, particularly here since COVID-19 and you can't go to all the traditional events and so forth. This, you can say, skill is ever more important. So I've put some very practical slides together about things I've done before, stuff that worked, stuff that failed, and so forth, that I'll share with you today. And it would be really cool if you guys would ask questions in the chat as soon as you think about them. I'll pick them up if I find space for it as I present. Otherwise, we'll take them in the Q&A. But don't hold them back. Just write them in the chat so it becomes a little bit more interactive. All right. I've prepared 80 slides, and Stephen told me to try and finish it by 1:30. So I might flip through some. I might skip some and so forth. But we'll take it from there. I'll share my screen now and give you my presentation, but do not think about this as a reason to stop asking questions. Just ask the questions as they come along. So the first question, can you see my screen now? Can anybody write in chat if they can see my screen? Looks like you can, right? Can I get a thumbs up if you can see my screen? Yes. Okay, good. I'll go to full screen mode now and then go through it. Please also stop me if it gets, too special, a marketing specialist, in the sense that most of you are C-levels and not kind of deep into marketing every day. So just stop me if I go too far down some line, but I'll try to keep it on a generic level. But let's go. Here we are. So just ultra short about me. I'm one of the co-founders of Dreamdata IO, and I'm responsible for sales marketing here, which means I have a lot of experience within marketing, and I'm learning a lot about sales from practical experience, but also from Stephen. And I still got a lot of things I need to get better at. There's kind of 4 areas that I want us to cover in this presentation. I think, first of all, it's the mindset towards digital lead generation, towards growth, as people say nowadays. Then there's what needs to be present on your website to actually have a fair chance of generating leads. Then it's a short discussion about who are we actually targeting, and then a lot of practical examples of stuff that worked and stuff that didn't work. So first of all, the mindset that I think we as founders need to tell ourselves, and that is that if no one knows about you, no one will buy your product. And in essence, when you build a business, you see that business constantly because it's what you do every day when you get up. But the truth is that because you're such a new brand, most of the world have no clue that you exist. So it's a prerequisite that you need to get attention to your company if you would want to have any chance of generating leads and generating revenue. You cannot do nothing because then nothing happens. Then another painful truth is this quite famous old quote about one of the first guys buying newspaper ads, that he was quite sure that half the money he spent on advertising is wasted, but the problem was that he didn't know which ones it was, and that's still very much present in today's, you can say, lead gen. You would have to try a lot of different things before you find kind of a formula that works. So you need to kind of start to build some thick skin. And I think this Thomas Edison quote works quite well here, that you will have to just view this as a string of constant experiments that you would need to do in order to find some recipe that kind of works for your lead gen. It means that you should have patience, you can say, with the people responsible for this. Make sure that they kind of have a good approach to testing a lot of stuff and document the recipe of what they're doing, so that every time they do something, they will learn from it and then they can try again. And at some point, hopefully the light bulb would start to work. Then to my experience as well, speed matters a lot, which means instead of over planning in these early stages, just start trying stuff out instead. It's not worth it to spend a month or 3 months building up the perfect go-to-market plan and then only to find out that, whoa, it actually didn't work when you start going to market. So instead, just start doing a lot of small stuff and stop monitoring if you get any like kind of feedback that it works or it doesn't work, so you can kind of constantly adjust. And then we'll leave it up to all the enterprise people to make these really, really big plans. But do stuff fast so you see what works and what doesn't work. And then the number one priority for growth, marketing, lead generation for us as founders with the little bank account that we have is that all of the activities we do should be focused towards stuff that actually gives us revenue. This means you should be able to somewhat prove that we did A and then we made B money. So this is the question you would want to be, if you're not the one doing the thing, all these activities yourself, you should ask them, how does this activity lead to us getting more revenue? And then if you have a long sales cycle, it can be very hard to judge whether the activity in the current month is actually leading to revenue. But then you need to have a discussion about what is a proxy for revenue, meaning that, okay, we can't send an invoice. Maybe we can book a demo call, because the demo call is a step very close to actually becoming a customer. If you can't get a demo call, can we get people to sign up to the newsletter and so forth? Constantly ask these questions about how is it that, well, if we do this, how does that lead to more revenue? And then the most valuable calculation that you can learn your growth revenue organization is this. Think about all your activities as, I'm buying a certain amount of attention. This attention has a certain price depending on what we do. And when people pay attention to us, a certain amount of people are going to end up becoming customers. That's kind of what's like classically called a customer acquisition cost, which means what am I willing to pay for a new customer? And in my world, as long as your customer acquisition is within the frame of what you've set forth as a positive result, you should constantly try to double, triple, 10x the investment in these areas, because they meet the criteria for what you're willing to pay for a new customer. And this is a mindset you need to build. Getting customers is spending money on activities, and that activity should hopefully be a profitable return on investment. And then if you do transactional businesses, you kind of spend money and then you get money. Whereas if you do software subscriptions, as a lot of us do, then you want to understand, I put up money now for my customer acquisition. How long does it take me to become profitable, that investment to become profitable through what you can call customer lifetime value? So you might be willing to pay 6 months subscription up front if you're able to get a customer. I think all of you kind of know this kind of way of thinking. And then it's for me, it's from there, do small stuff where you kind of find a little recipe that works, do them again if it's yourself, or ask your employees to try, can we do this one more time? And if you find out that kind of you can do it 2 times, how can we kind of triple or 10x what we do here? It's that simple. You need to constantly test stuff, and when something then works, try to see if you can repeat it. And if you can repeat it, how much more resources can you put into it? And then there's another factor that I found particularly interesting for those of you who do B2B, which is to have somewhat an understanding on how long does it take to get a new customer as an average expression, meaning that when I do my investment in marketing or growth or lead generation, when can I actually realistically expect a payback for this? This is essential to understand, because like I did this mistake a lot in my old company. I was expecting, when I did an investment, say in May, I looked at the revenue from May, but it's a ridiculously thing to look at in B2B because it takes 3, 6, 12 months to actually get your revenue back. So you can't judge your activity in the month of your investment, but you need to understand that it takes time to make money. And also each channel kind of plays a different role. If you do tracking traditionally with, like, for example, Google Analytics, it's going to look like people come directly to your website and give you money. But that's kind of the furthest away from the truth that I think you can be. You need to kind of find and stimulate the demand from certain channels. And then at some point, people will end up directly on your website and give you money. But it's not possible to scale that people comes directly to give you money. And then the very inconvenient truth about all these lead generation activities is that none of it is going to work forever. And by saying that, I'm saying that you need to constantly scale it as long as it works. And when the metrics gives you a negative return on investment, you need to kind of change that. I'll give you an example of, say, I bought a lot of Facebook ads 3-4 years ago, and it worked absolutely fantastic because Facebook was a kind of a blue advertising ocean back then. And then what happens is that marketers tell each other that Facebook is a fantastic place to advertise, which drives the price up on the marketplace. And then at some point, the ads become so expensive that it doesn't meet your return on investment targets anymore. So you should kind of expect that stuff stops working at some point, which is also kind of why how to successfully drive growth should look a little bit like an oil field here, that kind of you have wells that currently gives you revenue and you can kind of keep drilling there, but you should also expect this kind of well to stop working at some point. And that's the painful and fun part of doing marketing, growth, lead generation, or what you call it. So this is kind of the mindset, the thick skin you need to build in order to, I would say, be successful with the lead generation. Now I'll be very practical about what you need to do. In my opinion, I might be wrong, I might be right. Right? Please do tell me, especially if I'm wrong, in the comments. But the fundamental thing for driving digital lead generation is your website. You should think about your website as what I've said here. It's kind of your fishing boat. It's the center of attention of all your activity. Whatever you do, you need to drive these people to your website, because your website is the place where you make contact. It's the place where you pick up information about whether stuff is profitable or not. You need to funnel everything you do to your website, and I'll try to explain you that. I have a really bad habit of looking at TV ads and then going to people's website to check if they actually have any cookies installed or not. Because if you run TV ads, which is some of the most expensive activities that you can do, and you don't even have a cookie so you're able to know who these people are, you're wasting an insane amount of money. So what I mean by having a cookie installed on your website means you go to all these classical nowadays, modern ad networks. I'm talking Facebook, I'm talking Google ads, I'm talking LinkedIn ads, I'm talking Twitter ads. And you go to all these places and you set up an ad account with them. And then you need to tell these places, or you need to install the script of all these different platforms, because this enables them to identify users who've been on your website before. And that's, you can say, the most important mechanic of all your lead generation. You do stuff, they come to your website, they get an ID on these ad platforms, and then you can do ads towards them as they leave your website. I'm sure most of you have a lot of these things installed, but if you don't, then every day you're wasting a ton of value. So write this down, go to all these platforms, set up an ad account, take the pixel, install it on your website. Then you start to build audiences of people who know who you are that you can kind of address again. And then if you're more professional about this, then you'd start to store this information yourself as well inside a database that you own. The thing about using all these social media platforms and Google and so forth is that it's Google or Facebook or LinkedIn who stores this information for you. And it's good, it works, but it's also publicly listed companies that have kind of their own interest in how they deal with your data. There are tools out there like Segment or Dreamdata or something else that can kind of raw store the information of every user in your own database that you then own forever. And for some companies with long sales cycles, this makes sense. Now, as I had on this slide, micro conversions on your website is really the key to successful marketing. And what is a micro conversion? As I started working for Airtime, where I worked before Dreamdata, when you came to the website, the only thing you would be able to do were buy the product or leave the shop. 0.3% of all visitors bought the product, which means I needed to push 300 people to the website in order to get one conversion. Little by little, we started to add book a demo. I think 0.3% started booking the demo as well, and we converted 40% of all demo calls to a sale. You can also have a small newsletter contest or some sort of newsletter up-picking contest running. Actually, 2% of every visitor signed up to that newsletter. And then 1% of all the visitor chatted with us. So you see, instead of just converting 0.3% to contacts, we suddenly had 0.3% to demos, we had 2% to the contest, and 1% to the chat as well. So the value that the website made was a lot bigger than it was before. So picture you send 1,000 people or 10,000 people to your website, and you can only buy the product. Then you miss out all the value generated by all these other micro conversions. I think this makes sense, but do write in the chat if it doesn't make sense. I will give you a new example from Dreamdata. We've just launched a new ebook, we call it, which is basically just a collection of all the blog posts we've written, and you can download that. And then we've wrapped it into something that looks like a book, but you still get a PDF from us. If you look at the blue and green line here, that's kind of conversion to newsletters, and it's conversions to demo calls. The orange dotted line is downloads of the ebook. What you can see here is that from the moment we launched the ebook, which is kind of some sort of a micro conversion as well, we went from converting 2% of the visitors to somewhat 4 or 5% of all traffic to emails. So this means you can say the return on our ad spend just 2x just by putting up this ebook, because now we're 2xing the amount of emails that we collect. And this is kind of just a simple, it's a collection of blog posts that looks like a book, and now we 2x amount of emails that we collect. Extremely valuable. So this is kind of stuff you need to do for your website. Make sure you have all the cookies present. Make sure you have micro conversions, because then the value of pushing people to the website gets a lot larger. And I'll speak to all the different methods on how you can push people to your website in a little while, but we should just spend a few seconds or a few minutes talking about who is it actually that you push to your website, because definitely not all animals are equal. You can put in hundreds of thousands of people on your website, but if it's not the relevant audience that you push to your website, you're just wasting your money. So the first thing you should think about is, who are your customers, or who is it that you want as customers? This should kind of be the baseline of all your lead generation activity. You need to do stuff that push relevant people to your website. And relevant people, who are they? That's a good discussion to have as well. What I did in my old company as I started there, I just went to Google Analytics to see the demographics that Google Analytics could tell me about. And here I could see that people aged 25 to 45 were kind of 2/3 of all the traffic we had. And as it was hardware, 90% of those were men. So that gave me a very, very rough sketch of who am I targeting with my lead gen. It's men who's aged 25 to 45. And then as it was kind of go from a cable in your computer to wireless sharing of your screen, I kind of said to myself, it's most likely not my dad, because he's extreme tech conservative, I would say, but it's more the kind of people who can't wait to get the new iPhone, can't wait to get the new some sort of Android. So it's men 25 to 45-year-old that kind of are early adopters of technology. But this is it's a conversation you should have on your own. Who is it that we really want to target with our company? And then what we learned as we got smarter and more experienced is that we can't set as good audiences as these platforms can set for us. So for example, we did a test where we said, let's try to target lawyers, because lawyers have a lot of money. So they should have money to buy our product. It failed miserably. Whereas if we go to Facebook, for example, and give them information about who've been on our website, how does our current customers look, then Facebook is able to set an audience to advertise towards that is a lot better than what we're able to do ourselves. And then a super essential thing, as I said before, is to decide kind of what are you willing to pay for a new customer? And to get a new customer, how many good leads do you need? And this number is really what you should base all your lead gen actions on. Am I willing to pay £100 for a new customer? Am I willing to pay £1,000 for a new customer? Or what is the number that I regard success as? Because as soon as you have your kind of that intended customer acquisition cost, then you have a baseline for judging all your experiments. And this is essential. We do marketing because we want to make more money. And if we spend more than we make, then it's bad marketing. And then the last part is to figure out kind of where will we find our customers. I guess this guy here is probably well known by some of you. He's called Seth Godin, and he's done a ton of TED Talks. In one of them, he talks about tribes, and which means for my company, who is the tribe that I'm addressing? Say you guys are addressing a surfer, then to address this surfer, you can actually be present in just a few places around the internet and around the world, and you would look omnipresent because you would know he's reading these magazines, he's following these influencers, he's visiting these surf spots, he's attending these competitions. And if you're just present on those few things that tribe truly cares about, then you would look omnipresent even for a small budget. So you should start mapping out kind of what is the tribe that we are addressing? Who are they? How do they look? Where do they go? And so forth. With this knowledge, you start to be able to produce marketing to pay for attention in those certain spots. Maybe it's a Slack group. I don't know where kind of the geeks of your customers are going. I hope this makes sense. I'm running full screen, so I'm missing the questions, but I'll just go along. Stephen, you correct me if I'm wrong. Good. But so now we have talked about what's the mindset you need to go to this with. We've talked about your website, what needs to be changed. We've talked about who are you targeting. And now I'll talk about when you know all the three first things, what traffic should you push to your website then? And this is my experience, and I might be wrong, but Facebook is a great place if you can define an audience. An audience can be just people who you've been on your website, which you should always pay to advertise towards. But it could also be, say, as I knew with Airtime, it's 25 to 45-year-old men. That's good. If you're doing innovation, Facebook might be too broad a method to use. And that's where you kind of Google search and AdWords can be a great method, because if there's a certain search behavior, it's just a matter of paying to be present when people query Google for certain search behavior. Google Display Network kind of, which means the ads you'd see on different kind of newspapers, works somewhat the same as Facebook, but it's just a lot worse. LinkedIn sounds like a good idea, but LinkedIn is, to my experience, 10, 20x as expensive as Facebook, which means it's super annoying because LinkedIn sits on top of the data you want to be using, but they've just set the price for using their data super high, which very often breaks your calculations. The most successful companies on LinkedIn I've seen, and now I'm talking LinkedIn ads, are the companies that have large deal sizes because they can afford to put out a lot of money to generate leads from LinkedIn. I'll go deeper into each technique, but this is kind of the overview. And Twitter, I have not seen any good cases for that. So Facebook is good when you have a broad audience that you want to go to. Google AdWords you use if there's a search behavior. And LinkedIn is if you know exactly the kind of job role that people sit with. But be careful because it can be very expensive to use LinkedIn. So Google search ads, I'm just taking pictures of leads that we've had at Dreamdata. So here somebody came from a paid channel from Google search, and he searched for multi-touch attribution, which is somewhat what we do at Dreamdata. And then he arrived on our website and requested a demo. The same did Risa, but he came to our website and booked the demo. But the point here being is that they searched for something that is quite close to what we do at Dreamdata. And we paid money to Google to put them on our website, and they micro-converted in some way or the other. So this is the paid version of getting leads from Google. There's also the organic version, which means write articles on your blog, write content for your website, and then it gets indexed by Google, and then at some point people will end up on your website. It's the same functionality, but just the organic results, which Google is paying less and less attention to these days to monetize their ads. But it can be a very effective way to generate leads as well. Google Display is kind of these classic ads you'd see around newspapers and wherever you get your digital stimulants during the workday, that they have these small slots that where they sell the attention to Google, and that's where you can kind of pay money to be present. The quality is super low of the Google Display Network per my experience, but it might make sense to do retargeting there, which means advertising towards people who've been on your website. And then Facebook ads were kind of, I think, almost the core reason for us being successful at Airtime, because we were still the blue ocean days of Facebook, where it was super cheap to run ads, and it was underpriced because the quality was so high of what Facebook is able to do. And the thing that worked the best for us was using something called Facebook's lookalike audience. And that means you hand over emails of people who have bought your product to Facebook, and Facebook's algorithms will then try to match these emails with Facebook profiles. And when they match it with Facebook profiles, they'll be able to give you an audience that is, for example, 1% of the American people who reminds the most about, for example, Airtame's current customers. That audience is of such a high quality that when you pay money to push them to your website, they perform super well. So that's a strong recommendation for me. It's called Look-alike Audience on Facebook, and yeah, check that out. LinkedIn, of course, you kind of know this. Here's Jabra. They're selling a camera that costs around £10,000. So here, I definitely see that as a chance of being successful on the ROI. I don't know their targeting, but at least they're promoting it to me. You also have this audience, this possibility of sending a direct message to I think they call them in-mail on LinkedIn, which is just a message on your LinkedIn profile. I think all of you have seen them, and then they end up in your inbox. Here again, it's very simple to kind of find out. Like, say you send 100 of these in-mails, they will have a price, and then you need to be able to track whether the price you paid was worth the investment. Quite simple. I'll not go too deeply into, or maybe a little bit. So Facebook have kind of, you can optimize towards different things on Facebook. And me, I'm constantly, you can say, interested in trying to improve my performance. So I switched from trying to reach as many people as possible. No, I switched from focusing on conversion to trying to reach as many people as possible. So that pushed down my price to showing the ads to 1,000 people quite significantly, which then again pushed up the price I paid per click quite significantly, and my revenue completely failed. So I guess what I'm saying here is that you probably want a consultant for Facebook, because this is not something a founder should sit and spend time on. Then just a few examples of stuff we've done that worked in terms of getting traffic. For us, we're very interested in people who like data and growth, etc. So I submitted one post for growthhackers.com that managed to hit their weekly digest. It worked. Then we produced more blog posts that was also quite successful. And every time we get a lot of good leads from it. So for whatever you do, there's probably different kinds of forums and communities that you want to push towards. Something that I've found working super well and is super easy as well is, whatever you do, go to Google and write something, a relevant term, and then podcast afterwards. Then you'll start to see a lot of people within your industry doing podcasts. And you can say, maybe they only have a few hundred listeners of this podcast. But for us, being present on a podcast towards 200 people that's called marketing technology, that's highly relevant, or B2B attribution podcasts, if just the 50 right people listens to this, it's very easy. So what you can do also right now is just take up your smartphone, go to podcast, and start looking for podcasts relevant to you. I found the conversion rate to be quite good on this. Webinars work super well for us as well. So put together some people who can provide value for your audience, and then start inviting people to the webinar. Talk to your different kind of partners in your industry and try to ask, is there some way we can collaborate? For us, Segment is a relevant partner, and we wrote a blog post for their website. So we will kind of start to get a foot into the Segment community. Sponsoring of newsletters, I think, is also an underutilized option. So this is the newsletter of something called Zest, which is kind of a curated marketing content community. So I wrote to the owner of this, can we promote our ebook in this? And I think we actually generated more than 100 downloads of the ebook on just $100. So if there's certain things or certain newsletters in your industry, just try to write them and ask them whether you can kind of do some sort of collaboration. And then the last thing before we go to Q&A is just an homage to Stephen's rifle shot sales. I'll give you an example from Dreamdata. What we are targeting are B2B companies that has digital as attraction channel, and there are 50 to 500 employees. And what we then found out was that Seedtable, I actually don't know what they do. They made a list of the 111 most company startups to watch in Copenhagen in 2020. what we did with that list was to define out of the 111 startups, who are the B2Bs. And then we started finding out, okay, who are the head of marketings, the VP marketings of these B2B companies. And then I just reached out to Brad here. I said, hi, Brad, thanks for connect. I just out of the box connected with him because he looked like the right fit. And then he says, hey, no problem, Stephen. And then I start going on about, I saw you on this list of companies in Copenhagen to watch, and I'm surprised I didn't know you. And then he actually starts asking for a demo right off the bat. And then we set up a demo, and now he's a Dreamdata customer. So this thing about building a list, just finding the right people on LinkedIn, connecting, and just chatting them up from scratch is definitely also an option. You can also go to things like buildwith.com, which is directories of technology. Maybe there's certain technologies that's relevant for your audience. You can also go to LinkedIn and set certain job titles that could be relevant for you. What I'm just about to test out is actually, I've generated a dump of all the people I'm connected with on LinkedIn. And now I'm getting a freelancer from Asia to sort of sort the companies in B2B and B2C. And then we'll start contacting them to actually participate in this webinar.
Stefan, that's fantastic. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So I think that's, actually, there's the review platforms as well, but we can take that in the end, Stephen.
That's fantastic. And we've got 36 people online. So this is demonstrating the effectiveness of doing educational events.
Yeah.
So I'm going to throw it open to Q&A, but I'm just...
Yeah, I'll stop sharing my screen also. So let's just take it case by case. If you sit with a certain challenge, just write us and let's do it. Yeah, take it from there.
So I'm going to begin first by thanking you for an amazing tour. I learned a huge ton.
That's good.
When you're talking, and
it's not easy to teach you anything, Stephen.
Yeah, well, some of the points I took away is put cookies on your website from ad platforms.
Yeah, that's a
secondly. Think about micro conversions, so you can get visitors to do different things. Thirdly, think about the number you're willing to pay for a new customer. Yeah. That's how you measure success. And also, then by search terms with things like podcasting can be very effective. But where I wanted to start, and on behalf of a lot of the group who are listening to us now, very first baby steps. Where do you start? If you want to intercept people with intent looking for something that you buy, where do you start? Do you put content on your site? Do you go and look at Google Adwords?
Yeah.
And what are the first baby steps for so many of our portfolio companies?
Yeah.
Just want to start intercepting people with intent.
Good question. So I would say do none of this before you fix the website part, because otherwise you're going to be wasting all the things, the quality traffic you push to the website. So when that's done, I would do a brainstorm in my team about where on the internet is the need for our product mostly expressed. Like what does intent look like for us? When are people looking for something like what we do? And I can say for Dreamdata, we're starting to buy a lot of traffic from Capterra, which is this software review platform. Mm-hmm. Because if you're on Capterra, you're already you're qualified because you have the need for a certain piece of software. And then you have the people who's actually also looking at different kind of reviews before deciding what they buy. So a review platform could be a good place to start. It could also be, certain review platforms are super low-hanging fruit. And then there's also search terms, search queries on Google, which would quite directly express, I need your product. For example, for Dreamdata, if somebody writes B2B attribution, there's kind of no limit to what we're willing to pay for that person ending up on our website, because it's so close to a person who's gonna buy our product. Whereas if they write marketing attribution, they're still quite far away from. It might also be a B2C case. So, like, make a list of the queries that people can write that would be super close to somebody who's a likely customer. That's two ideas.
Okay, just picking that up. I always tell people to try and always ask prospects what they would be searching if they were looking for your thing. So now I'm going to go to some of the questions.
And that's actually, if we can just take a tail on that also, is every time you have a demo call or you have a new customer, ask them where they heard about you. Just like the simple question, how did you find out about our company? Because that can inspire you to kind of, where should you kind of put more investments into?
Oh, that's absolute golden advice. So let's get some of the questions in the chat. So Christian Eggert's asking, have you seen success cases in enterprise SaaS using Facebook?
Yeah, a ton. That's the short answer.
Okay,
so kind of, but you need to be able to measure success. What is success? You can spend a million on Facebook and not get any revenue out of it. So you kind of need to understand what are kind of the conversions that I'm looking for, or what does success look like. So, for example, Facebook has a format that is called lead ads, which is where you submit your email to sign up to some things. That can be a good conversion, whereas if you just pay money for a click to push people on your website, but you cannot prove any revenue out of that click, then that's probably not the conversion you look at. But in general, to me, Facebook is the number one platform to do ads. In certain companies where there's a specific query that leads to revenue, then Google Ads can be a really good option as well.
Okay, so I don't know if you can see the chat window.
I see it, yeah.
So Christian's asking more specific, which approach, i.e. what part of the funnel is?
Yeah, so all parts, basically. So there's retargeting ads, which is making ads towards people who've been on my website before. That's kind of somewhat low funnel, and which is ads I would always be running, because the people who's going to give you the best return on ad spend is people who know about your brand, because then you don't have to educate them. So that's what kind of the bracket is called retargeting. So making ads towards people who've been on your website. Then you can also say the top funnel behavior could be to set this 1% lookalike audience to, you say, give me an audience of 1% of the UK people who reminds the most about my customers. It's quite high funnel, but it's still quite good quality. So when you start pushing these people to your website, they will convert rather okay if you've set up the website correctly.
Amazing. So I'm going to go to Jordan's question. So Jordan says, we're B2B. It sounds like LinkedIn will be a great play for us. Do Facebook's lookalike ads work if you have a list of previous customers' business emails instead of their personal ones?
So, well, I think what Jordan is addressing here is people normally create their Facebook account with their private email, whereas he normally has their professional email. And what I think it's somewhat. You can check it out, but Facebook needs to match, I think it is 500 emails or so. So if you have a lot of business emails, you would probably need to upload 3,000, 4,000 to have 500 Facebook profiles match. But you can test that out. But Jordan is right that it needs to be the email of the Facebook profile.
Okay, so that's a technicality with Facebook. And then we've got a question from Roland. We have a SaaS self-service platform where people can try before they buy. What are some of the ways we can activate lost clients?
That's a good question as well. So on Facebook, you can make one thing is you can retarget based on the cookie, which means you've been on our website. Now we're gonna, that anonymous user that Facebook have, I want to show him a video. I want to show him a blog post and so forth. You can also, if you have the emails of people who you want to reactivate, you can also upload that audience to Facebook. You can upload that audience to LinkedIn and so forth, and say only these 100 people needs to see this particular ad. What I would always, so what a lot of people don't know is the organic reach of Facebook pages for companies is, I think it's now at 1%, trending towards 0%. And what that means is that if you don't pay money, Facebook will not show whatever Facebook post you make on your company page to anyone. So to get people to view your stuff on Facebook, it's just pay to play. You need to be aware that if you post on Facebook, I need to pay to boost it. Otherwise, Facebook will not show it to my audience.
Mm-hmm. Wow, we've got that really, really interesting stuff about Facebook. So we got Bernard is asking about micro conversions. And we've got a number of questions about micro conversions, and I'll come to some of the other ones in a second. So Bernard, regarding inbound leads landing into your website, what is your thoughts about regarding what the ideal primary call to action should be, whether it's book a demo, try it for free? What are the most common options, and what's your thinking?
Yeah, here I'll have to give the annoying answer of you'll have to test that out yourself, meaning that try the different things and kind of make a mark in your calendar and then A/B test this until you see what works. I didn't know that that ebook would convert that well, but it does. So like try different stuff to see kind of what people like or not.
Okay, so it's going to be, you have to test it out for yourself. We had a question earlier. We had a question earlier about the trade-offs between different. When you introduced micro conversions, did you lose conversions to other calls to action?
No, you can say kind of it's kind of a snowball that builds for sales. So kind of these are people who are not ready to buy yet, but you still want to kind of keep the conversation building with them. So it starts building momentum for later sales. Can somebody? Yeah, I can imagine that somebody, instead of buying, booked a demo. I can imagine that, but for the monthly revenue onwards, I can definitely say that we made more money month on month.
Okay, let's go to Roland's follow-up question about he has an automation email campaign for all registered SaaS platform users that they've got. What's the best practice to email intensity? How many automated emails is too much?
Yeah, again, you'd have to test that out yourself, but I kind of.
But Stefan, how do you know it's too much?
So all these
unsubscribe.
Yes, exactly. So all these platforms, automation platforms, have an unsubscribe rate, and if how many? I would say everything below 1% unsubscribe rate, you're not sending enough emails. So every email you send to your leads or newsletter signups, if that sign-off rate is below 1%, you're not sending enough emails.
Amazing. That's really amazing thing.
Because it is like they gave you your email. Yeah. Then buy our product or unsubscribe from the list.
Okay, I love it. So then we got some questions about GDPR and cookies. Paz is asking, how are we going to retarget people in the coming cookieless world? And I think it might be useful just to re-explain what ad retargeting is, because it's so important.
Yes. Okay. So Apple and their Safari browser is leading this push towards a less cookie-driven internet. And a cookie is basically an ID that these platforms sets in your browser, saying that this browser was on our website. And then when you do retargeting, for example, you look up this cookie ID and say, I want to show this cookie an ad. What Apple is doing is that they've introduced something called Intelligent Tracking Prevention, which is ITP short. And here they started out allowing cookies from ad platforms for 30 days. Then they went to 7 days, and I think now they're down to 1 day, which means if your sales process is longer than 1 day, they'll struggle to actually track whether you converted or not.
Interesting.
And then Safari was then joined by Mozilla. So I think now you're looking at 30% of the internet traffic, like broadly speaking, but more in certain markets and certain niches that just look like people who comes directly to your website. And that's part of the reason why Google Analytics is totally untrustworthy, because Google Analytics sets a cookie as well, and after a day they will not be able to read this. And you can say that's kind of what's driving a tool like what we do at Dreamdata, because instead of relying on what the cookie that ad platforms set, then we set our own cookie and then we store it ourselves. and we have that information forever, that somebody came from this campaign, visited your website, became a customer 2 months later or so. Then to the shorter cookie time, which is going to be a problem for everybody, then this is particularly where micro-conversions becomes relevant, because back in the day, you could push people to your website and then you could retarget them for 180 days. That was a perfect time to be a digital marketer, but now you're down to 1 day. This means that to be able to retarget people who have come to your website, you need their email, or you need them to like your Facebook page. They need to kind of leave some kind of trace in order for you to re-engage them.
Does that help answer Nina's question about when you have EU-based traffic, how do you solve this in terms of GDPR? Is that related to the...
Yeah, so here we are mixing up stuff because GDPR is about PII data. What is short for personal identification information, or what is it? Do you remember, Steve?
I don't know, actually. Can someone put in the chat window if anyone knows what PII is?
So, like, roughly speaking, you retarget on Facebook with third-party data. That means people are anonymous. It's just a cookie and an audience. GDPR is concerned about personal identifiable information, and this is something like, if you sign up for a newsletter, if you sign up for a demo call, you put in the terms that now by submitting your email here, we are also allowed to use this information. Nina, did that answer the question?
I can only set a cookie of the website.
Yes, that is also true. So if no cookie is set, you cannot do retargeting. That's true. So that's why you see all these cookie banners on the internet asking you to accept to set the cookie. So if the cookie is not set, you cannot do this retargeting.
Yeah. I'm going to go change tracks here and go back to a question Clement asked about the chat, whether it's better to have a human or a bot. Or...
Can anybody raise their hand if they've had a good chatbot experience? This is something I feel quite strongly about. Like, say you do but it depends on the business you are. For us who like do deal sizes north of $10,000, then I would absolutely not leave it up to a bot. If you can say you run a high scale, high velocity business with very low deal sizes, then a chatbot might make sense. I used to work for Upwork, and if they like get 10,000 requests from Indians every day regarding something, then like you probably want to have the chatbot to kind of fence off your your human customer success.
How would you measure the effectiveness of a human chat capability?
So before I answer that, I'll give you an example from Airtame. When we, I think 2016, added 3 or 4 more salespeople to man the chat, also in US hours. We were based in Copenhagen, Denmark, so we were awake during Europe work hours, but during the night, a lot of chats would come in. And then we would answer them the next day. Our conversion rate to sales on the website went up quite significantly when we had a human in US time zone that could answer the question right away. Mm-hmm. And then they bought the product. Whereas, so that was just conversion rate, people on the website and conversions. So this thing is just like the time to your answer matters a lot to the leads, because when they ask, that's when the intent is the biggest. I think I somewhat indirectly answered it.
Amazing. So got a question from James. Is a combination worth using a chatbot for 10K deal plus deal sizes?
I would never use a chatbot for that. But I'm not saying that there could be a scenario where it makes sense. If, let's say, 9 out of 10 questions you get in the chat is the same, then you probably want to automate. So kind of the first reply is that reply.
Yeah. We've got quite a few chatbot companies in the portfolio, actually. So we've got some real experts. I'm going to start wrapping up now and say thank you, Stephen. That's been an amazing tour of the basics of digital lead gen.
people can just connect with me on LinkedIn, and I'll answer any questions there.
And so as well as you contacting Stefan directly, and I really recommend you do that, Diana and I are going to collect together feedback from you as to what you want to cover in future sessions, so we can target this material at what people want.
Yes, exactly, Stephen. Please do share your thoughts and feedback. It's super useful and handy for us to plan maybe a follow-up if needed, or maybe something specific, or if you have like questions that we didn't manage to answer, that's your chance to hand it over to us.
And you'll share the slides, right, Diana?
Yeah, definitely. We'll share the slides. You also mentioned your ebook, so I'll find a link.
Yeah. You can count on being retargeted if you download the ebook.
What I think is also amazing. What I think is amazing is this is the Seedcamp community helping each other. So within our own network, we've got a real guru in Stefan and Dreamdata about how you do this. We've got chatbot experts if you want to talk to them. We've got people across all parts of the business system. So it's an amazing example of how effective it is to help each other. Right, with that, I think we're going to say thanks very much to Stefan, and we look forward to seeing you all again.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.